I'm privileged to be talking to Vávra Suk. He's the editor of a Swedish newspaper, Nya Tyder, and he knows quite a lot about South Africa too.
Yes.
But we now want to focus the conversation a bit on Sweden itself. It's not a country that's all that well known in South Africa, and even in some of the English-speaking countries like the US, the UK, Australia, and so on. But we all know that Sweden is supposed to be a very politically correct country and quite leftist as well.
Oh, yeah.
And a lot of us are fascinated by it because there seem to be two Swedens. There's one Sweden that's more composed of normal people, and you've even got quite a right-wing movement in Sweden. And on the other hand, it's for years it's had the reputation of being very politically correct, feminist, and left-wing.
Yes.
So how many people are there in Sweden?
It's over 10 million now, and really for the past many years, the rise in population has been only due to immigration. And I mean, as you say, Sweden is very politically correct. It's a very extremist country, I must say, and the politicians, they are aware. You know, in Denmark or Norway, the neighboring countries, they talk about the Swedish situation, which they fear, which they take as an example of what could happen if they do something wrong with multicultural. And the Swedish politicians are aware that they are different, that they are extreme, but they view it as something positive. They would say, yes, but that's because we are ahead in development, the rest will follow. But I don't think they will, because Sweden is really falling apart in terms of welfare services, medical, in schools and so on. So because the state cannot really fund all this, what's going on.
But at one time, Sweden had almost a kind of a utopia here, because you had very little inequality and you had a high standard of education and healthcare, and it was also a rich country. You had lots of industry at the time. Well, when was that time? About the 1970s or so?
Yeah, actually it started after the Second World War, because Sweden was not devastated.
Yes.
So Sweden could build up a lot of industry and sell to the rest of the world. And it went on, and it was, to me, a very sympathetic idea of a people's home. The Social Democrat introduced a kind of combination economy between socialism and capitalism, where you had big state companies that would provide for the basic infrastructure and the basic needs of the nation, and you would treat it as a home. You would try to, keep production of agricultural food and so on inside the country, your own medical, pharmaceutic industry, your own textile, your own shipyards and so on. And it's very difficult.
And you had Volvo as well.
Yeah, Volvo and
Saab.
Saab, yeah, and our own airplanes and so on.
Of which we bought some in South Africa.
Yeah, still. But I mean, the globalists don't like a nation state because you can't profit from it. And what's been happening ever since is that no matter if it's the so-called conservative or the social democrat governments, they all liberalize the economy. And what they are doing is they sell out all these infrastructure, all these state companies that Swedish taxpayers already paid for. And they are selling it to private companies that do, they're often from abroad, and they make money out of it. So, for example, when they privatized all the electricity, all the power companies, electricity gets more expensive. And now it's problems, for example, in medication. You can't. There is a shortage of medicine, and it's because Sweden is a too small market for the big pharmaceutic companies to care about. So you have long delays and so on. And also the economy, the just-in-time economy, means you don't have any stockpiles of medicine, which Sweden used to have. But now when everything is commercial, it doesn't pay off. So you can't go to the storage and just get new medicine. You have to order them, and it takes time. So the next thing I see will be privatized is most of the police force. You could already see now that they are hiring private security companies to do a lot of the police work, like, for example, keeping order on demonstrations or patrolling the streets and so on. So we are getting there. And I mean, a lot of people talk about immigration.
But will the police men and police women, will they still be beautiful Swedish blondes, the private police?
Yeah, that they are actually actively trying to recruit Muslims and other foreigners. Yeah, because they say most of the criminals are foreigners or foreign foreign descent. So if you have policemen, that they will have more authority, they will understand their problems and so on. And I mean, the multiculturalism has brought such, types of crimes that you couldn't imagine before. Now, for example, we have all those girls that jumps out of balconies because they're a Muslim and they meet the wrong man, the wrong boy, or look at the wrong boy, which means a disgrace for the family, and they fall out of the balcony. It's quite a common...
Might be pushed, but nobody will know.
Yeah.
But when did Sweden, because Sweden was a very homogeneous country, wasn't it, until fairly recently?
Yes. For a long time, basically from the Viking Age, there was like 2000...
So from the Swedish Vikings,
2000 BC, there was an invasion of the Indo-European tribes, and they basically killed the indigenous population in 2000 BC. And from that on, I mean, if you look at graves from that period, it's the same genetic code as Swedes today, yes.
Wow. So you had this mighty warrior, beautiful women, blonde, blue eyes, for centuries and even 2,000 years. And then at a certain point, the social democratic government took the decision that you need immigrants. And why did you need immigrants?
Oh, they always mask it as some kind of charity or helping people. But I mean, it doesn't matter if it's the leftist or the so-called right government, because they just have different arguments. The leftists would say, oh, we have to help those poor people and
the
refugees, and the right would tell you, the conservative would tell you that, oh, but we need this workforce. Swedes are getting older and older. They don't have enough children, so actually the population would decrease if it wasn't for immigration. And they say, so who would take care of you when you're old? We must have all those Muslims to take care of you. And I mean, it's the same word as saying it's population switch, population exchange.
Like the French author Renaud Camus is talking about le grand remplacement, the great replacement. They actually want to replace your population.
Yeah, that's what's happening.
Yeah.
And if you talk to the ordinary leftists, they would tell you, oh, but if we don't have any blacks, don't have any whites, it's all the same, mixed kind of ethnicity.
And so what percentage of Sweden, say up until about 1980, it was homogeneous, or was it?
Yeah, absolutely.
You had a 100% white Swedish population up until about 1980?
Yeah.
And
there were some gypsies, there were some, Sapmi people up in the north, but that was really fringe.
Yes. And from that moment onwards, you started getting these refugees and immigrants, including from the ANC. You had some ANC people as well at the time.
Oh, yeah. Sweden was very involved in
that. They actually financed the ANC.
Yeah, that's true.
In fact, there was a Swedish diplomat who was also ambassador in South Africa. His name is Anders Millerman, and he stated on the radio in South Africa that without Sweden, the ANC would never have come to power in South Africa.
Oh. Yeah, I can imagine they sent a lot of money.
$400 million
yeah.
that they gave to the ANC.
Yeah.
But then the situation started changing in 1980, and then what's the percentages of the population now? How many are non-native?
It's not official. I mean, they are trying to hide statistics about this, but it's about 1 million non-European foreigners in Sweden. So more than 10% of the population. And I mean, for example, in Malmö, which is the third largest city in Sweden, Swedes are already a minority, and they move outside of the city to small towns and villages to run away from multiculture and all those problems.
Yes, well, the classic phenomenon of white flight that we've seen in the United States and in South Africa, when the center of Johannesburg became black, all the businesses moved out, all the whites just fled. So you've got exactly the same dynamic here. As soon as the immigrants move into the city, the Swedes flee.
Yeah, and I mean, only during the past 10 years, the population of Africans and Arabs doubled. So it's a huge influx. And I mean, this creates also...
But do they work, these Africans and Arabs in Sweden?
They have a much lower working rate than Swedish population. Especially some groups, for example, with Somalis. We have a lot of Somalis. It's one of the biggest groups. I think 80% of the population in working age does not work. And
but how do they live there?
Of the Swedish taxpayers' money, of course.
Okay, because they get a monthly allowance, a grant from the government.
Yeah,
they get housing, they get medical,
exactly, everything.
Education, everything's free, and they can rape the women. Well,
they're not allowed to rape the women, of course.
But apparently there are not very big, punishments or long prison sentences for rape in Sweden, and it's become, people are talking about a rape epidemic here.
Yeah, it is. I mean, yes, you get, of course, a sentence, you get to prison for rape, of course, and actually, even the feminists, they talk a lot about this kind of sexual crimes, but they focus more on, the feminists often are from the establishment, the elite of the establishment, so their targets are often white males.
Yeah, so it's
in
patriarchy.
Positions, the Me Too movement and so on. So, for example, now Sweden, you have all those cultural things coming here from the Arab world, like taharush, when you group harass women. If this group sees a woman, they
like we saw in Cologne in Germany.
Yeah, in Cologne, maybe have all those. Also
you've got that
in
sort
Sweden.
of thing.
So what do the Swedish feminists do? Yeah, that they will promote a law. Now that we have this law, that you must consent to sex. If you and your wife, want in the evening in the bed, she has to consent. Yes,
so she has to sign a slip. Like
you have to, as a man.
Yes.
You have to prove that she consented.
Okay. So,
in some way.
Okay.
Otherwise, it's rape.
Okay. But
so, and I speaking of cultural influences from all those countries, I mean. The politicians would say, the Prime Minister, Stefan Löfven, said, we have been naive. But I mean, it's not about naivety. Everybody knew that the taharush, it has been in Cairo, in the Arab Spring and so on. White journalist women were attacked in this kind of way. And we have another crime category that is unheard of. It's homosexual group rapes.
Wow, homosexual group rapes.
Yes, so, and that is an Afghan thing, because they have this tradition of so-called dancing boys. those young boys who are like held like sex slaves with rich men, and it is outlawed in Afghanistan. There is a law against this, but no one cares about it. Even the police stations have their own dancing boy.
Wow.
And policemen who come to a police station where there is no this kind of pleasure boy, they don't want to serve there. And this is well known. I mean, American newspapers write about this. I wrote an article where American soldiers report on this, and they warn against this, and they also interview an Afghan police chief, and he says the Taliban has now found our weakness. They send in young boys, beautiful boys, and those kill more policemen than the Taliban's do.
Wow.
So I mean, and if you get this to Sweden, I mean, they are not going to change their behavior. And also, I had a story about the Swedish force serving in Afghanistan under NATO mission, and so, and their job was to train police, Afghan police, and at the final ceremony when they were going home after they trained the police, they got a gift. And the gift was a donkey that was so young it didn't have teeth yet, so it could pleasure the men.
Wow.
So, and you're taking this culture into this society, and you're surprised that there are conflict and it doesn't really work. I mean, how naive can you be?
Yeah, that sounds. It sounds almost as fantastic as some of the stuff that's going on in South Africa. There seems to be this multicultural madness that's taken hold of the world, and everybody just has to mix in this multicultural mode, as it was called by Barbara Lecter, or what was her name?
Lerner Specter, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And but is it all? I mean, Sweden had this almost utopia, an industrial state with equality and education, high. I think 1/3 of Swedes have a university degree. Many other countries spoke about the Swedish model. So is it just going to be downhill from here, or do you see any hope on the horizon?
I mean, the transformation of the society is going quicker and quicker. And you can see it in the schools that a lot of the children are not Swedish. It's really in the schools you see this.
I think you told me that in some schools the majority are African.
Not only in some schools, in many schools. Yeah, Africa and Middle East.
Really? In some of the schools, the majority are from Africa and the Middle East?
Oh, yes. Okay. You can have 90% Africa and the Arab world.
Wow.
In many schools, yes. And the Swedish people have been silent for a long time. On other places...
But you've got censorship here as well. I mean, you've got very strict... hate speech laws, for example. Somebody told me about a little old lady of 80 who said, we don't need more Africans in Sweden. And she was actually sentenced. She was convicted by the court.
True. We were writing about that in my newspaper, and she's 68, I think, and she wrote that she thinks that every African should go back and that there should be no Africans in Sweden. And she got sentenced, to community service, I think, and fined. And we actually called the judge and asked him, so how many Africans must you want to have in Sweden in order not to be punished? Because 0 is evidently not allowed. So how many do we need to, want? And of course they couldn't answer, because it's a stupid... It's the whole idea of these hate speech laws. It's just censorship. There's no logic in it. To frighten the population, not to speak their mind about this problem that everybody sees.
But that's also almost a global phenomenon now. We've got it in South Africa, we've got it in the US, and Facebook and Twitter and all these people. They're trying to shut down criticism of this system.
Exactly, because there is an opposition.
Yes.
And people are speaking more and more.
But do you see a change now in the Swedish society?
I do. Yeah. Even in the extreme Sweden, things are now changing. You could see it in Hungary, in Poland, and in France it's coming with the yellow vests. And Italy has actually now a nationalist government, which is fantastic, and they shut down the immigration, and it's really going the right way. So, and I see it's really emerging now in Sweden also. And it's a totally new movement.
Yeah.
I mean, it's, the right and left, the traditional conservative liberal and the traditional socialist, they joined forces against the people. Because now there is no real difference between, especially in Sweden, between the right and left. You have, the cultural Marxists have won totally on the cultural scene. Even the liberals and conservatives, they wouldn't argue, about homosexual rights, about feminism, and so forth. And the socialists capitulated to market capitalism. There is no socialist basically today who would advocate a 5-year plan economy. So they are basically agreed.
So the left controls the culture, their ideas control the culture, and then the center-right, their ideas apply to the economy. And they've got a consensus against the people.
They both despise the people, because the people are messing with their plans. They say, oh, we don't want it this way, you should do it this way. And, and especially you see this in Brussels for the European Union, how these ideas are pushed down to the people. And the Swedish media also sees the people like someone you should educate. You should
re-educate.
Or re-educate, yeah. To that they feel that they have this obligation to push the audience in some direction, to not only inform them about the news, but give them the opinion about the news, how they should perceive it. And the people, they are not taking it anymore. They don't want this. So you have this, what they call populist movement.
Okay, yes.
Yeah, so and the populist, it's actually a vertical struggle from the people against the oppressing left-right, political and cultural media elite that rules. And this is a really great force with the people, because they demand democracy. They demand the power back, to take the power back from the politicians who think that they are there for their own, to do what they like, and to make them to be the servants of the people again.
Yes, and they don't want immigrants. They don't want all these Arabs and blacks raping the Swedish women, and they don't want...
Yeah, as I said earlier, the immigration is only a tool for globalism, to get into a country, to destroy a country, to make it weak, to take away the culture from the people, to take away their homogeneity, their strength, and to put in big global internationalist companies who just make money out of this. Actually, a funny thing is that Sweden now may have its own, the Liberal Party may have its first black leader.
Yeah, I saw that. That's quite amazing.
A woman, Nya Tyder. The funny thing is that she is the, more of a critic to multicultural society. Her opponent is the multicultural guy in the Liberal Party. So they will soon decide, and it looks like Nya Tyder is actually winning the competition. So, but I wrote actually an article about this a few weeks ago. About my message was, don't be fooled by this false criticism of multicultural, because What she says is she opposes the idea of a multicultural society. The Swedish culture, the traditional Swedish culture of a strong family and so on, was destroyed during the 70s and 80s. In the 80s, actually, the parliament adopted a law saying that Sweden is now a multicultural society. There is no privileged or preferable culture. All cultures are equal. There is no right and wrong. Everybody is right. And they used it to destroy the traditional Swedish culture. Now what Nyamko Sabuni is talking about, she wants the Muslims and other foreigners coming to Sweden to integrate or to take, she called it, what we have achieved. So it's not the traditional Swedish culture, it's a new culture. It's a liberal, social Marxist, this elite establishment culture. So as long as they put gay flags on the mosque and marry same couples, it's fine.
Okay.
Yeah, so
that's Swedish culture.
They destroyed the old culture by multiculturalism. They introduced their own culture of social Marxist liberal agendas, and now they want everybody to take that culture and accept it.
Oh, that's amazing. But you've got a right-wing party in Parliament now, or one that's considered right-wing.
Yeah, the Swedish Democrats, yes, they...
what percentage did they get in the elections?
Oh, they managed to now be the third biggest party. They were competing for second place. It's 17%, I believe. A lot of people hoped for more. There was more in the opinion polls, but it follows the trend of Europe where populist parties actually get support. And now, finally, the Swedish Democrats are actually getting into power in municipalities and especially in southern Sweden, when there's a lot of problems with immigration. As I told you, if people move away from Malmö, they will create a majority in those smaller cities, and they vote for the Swedish Democrats.
So it's almost like a Swedish Folkstart outside Malmö,
yeah,
in the municipalities.
Right,
yes.
right.
So where you can still be Swedish, and where you can, because I see Swedes are very patriotic, because everywhere you see Swedish flags, people at their homes, they've got flagpoles with Swedish flags, and they eat Swedish food, and they're proud of being Swedish.
Yeah. That's true. Even though most people don't dare to criticize these policies, it's a very strong social stigma involved and so on. It reminds me of the Eastern Europe, communist Eastern Europe, where people could speak at home, but in public they were afraid. So it's a way to see if you're friends. If you can say, oh, but the immigration issue. If the other ones say, yes, I know, you're friends. Then you're safe. But if they say, oh, what do you mean immigration? Then you should be, they're just acquaintance.
So there's a public discourse and there's a private discourse, and the private discourse is more towards populism and even nationalism and taking back Sweden.
Oh yeah, because people see, even if they are not nationalists, they see that this isn't working at all, and it suddenly gets to them, privately, personally. Because as long as you can take your car to your job is somewhere, with Swedish colleagues or an educated Arab, it's fine. But for children, for example, to take the bus or train to go to the school with those very different cultures, it really is a huge threat to people, and they are beginning to really see that and take measures, yes.
Yeah, one statistic just to compare to South Africa that I saw was that when it comes to road accidents, you've got 80 fatalities in Sweden and we've got 16,000. So, even though Sweden is going the wrong way, you're not, not quite where we are.
Right. Yeah, but we are moving your way.
Yes. If nothing gets done, you'll end up being a third world country. Like,
Yeah, but as I said, now the populist movement, especially in Europe, but also now really starting in Sweden, it gives me great hope. And I think people will, as soon as they realize they are not alone, it's okay to criticize multicultural because, I mean, we have the moral high ground. We are defending the rights of the indigenous people. We are defending law and order. I mean, we have the moral right.
Yeah, and the safety of women and children.
Yeah. So as soon as people see that it's okay to speak their mind, I think we will see a huge change.
Yes, there are some of the leftists, including I saw something in South Africa, in one of the left-wing websites. They said that or call it then the populist movement has become almost transnational, just like the old communist movement was.
We are united in our differences.
Exactly. Yes. Yes, and that's very. I think that's very exciting because people speaking different languages, whether Swedish or French or Italian.
Yeah, but we have the same Western culture. I mean, we have to defend Europe.
Yes.
It's obvious. It's. We shouldn't mess with the Muslim countries, bomb them to democracy or whatever, and we shouldn't allow them to interfere in our countries. It's very simple, it's moral, it's live and let live.
Exactly. Well, on that note, I must thank you, Vávra, for this very interesting discussion, and let's hope we can do so once again in the future sometime.
Thank you so much. We're hoping for the best.
Thanks.